terrorist attacks that occurred on September 11, 2001, the so-called 9/11 events, are among the most bone-chilling in recent memory. Approximately 3,000 people died in New York and Washington, D.C. in those parallel attacks, one on the World Trade Center buildings and the other on the Pentagon itself. I personally watched those events on television on that fateful day, as did so many millions of others around the world. We were all frozen, and we all looked to national leadership to take us in a direction of safety. We asked few questions, but we demanded an immediate physical response. We were hurt as a nation and as a people, and we trusted others with official responsibility to steer us to a safe harbor. Soon we found ourselves at war in Afghanistan and Iraq, wars that never seemed to end. The distance in time from when those things all started and the present has allowed many people to snap out of the daze that froze us like an animal caught in the headlights of an oncoming vehicle. The cry that we should not raise uncomfortable questions out of respect to those who died in the attacks and their families no longer has the same emotional punch that it once did. Now many people have been raising questions about the events that occurred back in September of 2001. Indeed, so many people with stellar academic, governmental, corporate, and even military credentials have raised so many serious doubts about the official version of what happened back then that the list of more than 3,000 such people reads like a who's who of important or authoritative personalities. Since these ideas can seem impossible to many people, it is probably worthwhile to at least spend a few minutes outlining in a broad manner some of the major debates that currently exist regarding the 9/11 attacks. I will return to many of these debates in more detail as we go through the remote viewing data for this project. Again, I am not supporting or defending any one side of these debates at this point. I am just summarizing some of the key elements that have been raised by others. Indeed, I started this project thinking that the official story of the events would hold up and the conspiracy theories would be dismissed. Probably the most significant of all of the debates is whether or not Building 7 of the World Trade Center was brought down by a controlled demolition or whether it collapsed by itself. PBS even broadcast a chilling documentary titled 9/11 Explosive Evidence, Experts Speak Out, where dozens of experts go on record questioning the official and seemingly incredulous explanation of an office furniture and diesel fire bringing down that building. This is also a theme of a shorter and related video hosted by Ed Asner, former president of the Screen Actors Guild, a job once held by Ronald Reagan, that is widely available on YouTube. Building 7 was a very well-constructed building housing all sorts of official, governmental, and commercial offices. And those who argue in favor of the controlled demolition explanation point out that in the entire history of modern architecture, never has an office building collapsed as a result of an internal fire. At most, they burn out like a hollow shell. There is also the sudden way in which the structure collapsed on its own footprint that resembled a controlled demolition, and there appears to have been the sound of a major explosion at the base of the structure immediately prior to the collapse. There are also early statements made by official personnel suggesting that a controlled demolition was the cause of the collapse, and some in the media seem to have reported the collapse on air prior to the structure's actual collapse, as if they were fed the transcript prematurely. Perhaps the most troubling is that if Building 7 was brought down by a controlled demolition, such a thing needs a great deal of prior planning, perhaps weeks. The demolition charges would need to have been placed in the structure long before the airline impacts into the Twin Towers, and it seems impossible for demolition charges to have been placed in the structure in just a few hours on the day of the collapse, while the structure was on fire and the chaos of the Twin Towers was next door. The next most contentious debate revolves around how the Twin Towers could have collapsed as a result of the airliner impacts. Prior to the collapse, it was pretty much agreed within the architectural community that an airliner impact could not collapse those structures. It could start a fire, but that is about it. The structures were designed to be able to withstand all sorts of abuse, from hurricane force high winds, all sorts of torturous weather, and even geological movement, and yes, aircraft impacts. Moreover, even if the aircrafts did collapse some of the upper floors, why did the lower floors collapse? The buildings pancaked to the ground, and the lower floors did not collapse until all of the floors above them were gone. Now, the lower floors were strong enough to support all of those upper floors, so why did they collapse when the weight of the upper floors was no longer there? The lower floors should have stood like the Rock of Gibraltar, or so the argument goes. Then there is the matter of numerous firefighter and police witnesses to the collapse of all three structures, reporting that there were literally streams of molten steel flowing among the ruins of the freshly collapsed structures, resembling, in their own words, a foundry. Jet fuel and burning office furniture cannot melt steel, and when the steel is embedded within thick concrete, it is hard to imagine how it could get hot enough to melt under any circumstances. With regard to the Pentagon attacks, the debates are no less serious. Mysteriously, all but one of the Pentagon video sensors were disabled at the time of the attack. One general who saw the initial video from the one working sensor immediately after the event said that the subsequent official release of the video seems to have been altered, with an airliner image placed on one frame of the video. And very troubling indeed is that the wreckage does not seem to match that of an airliner impact. There is no evidence of the vehicle which hit the Pentagon as having wings. There are no wings in the wreckage. There are also no marks on the Pentagon walls where the wings would have hit. The hole in the Pentagon also seems to be the wrong size for an airliner. There is also the troubling matter of how the vehicle flew. It apparently flew over some trees and wires a few hundred feet away from the Pentagon, and then immediately dipped down a few hundred feet and leveled out, flying parallel to the ground, just a few feet over the ground at incredible speed, and then horizontally hit the wall of the Pentagon. That is fancy flying worthy of the best fighter pilots or high-tech remote control. Some argue that an airliner simply cannot do that, even with the best of pilots, and it seems unlikely that terrorists with only a minimum of flight training could have done that. There is also the issue of the GPS that was available in the black box of the aircraft. Some have noted that the recorded altitudes don't seem to match the radar data, and arguments have been made that the GPS and other black box data could have come from a flight simulator. And finally, there is the major issue of what actually happened inside the hijacked planes. Without video or audio recordings, we really do not know. The phone calls made from the planes should not have been possible at high altitudes. And then there is the issue of the accuracy of the flying done by those who piloted the planes into the Twin Towers as well as the Pentagon, again raising the question of whether the planes were actually flown by the terrorists or whether they were flown by remote control. Again, none of these are my arguments. They are just some of the major points from a much longer list that have been raised within the large, growing, and very vocal community of people who don't believe the official governmental story regarding the 9/11 events. The government does seem to be largely silent with respect to addressing these charges, at least in any type of comprehensive and persuasive manner. It seems that the favored response is simply to be silent, trusting that the mainstream media will dutifully not give airtime to the ideas. If this actually is a plan, well, so far it seems to be working. I am Courtney Brown, and I am director of the Farsight Institute, a nonprofit research and educational institute dedicated to the study of the phenomenon known as remote viewing. The Institute is the most well-recognized venue for full-blown public studies using remote viewing, as it is performed using methods that were developed by the United States military and used for espionage purposes, or methods that are derivative of those procedures. I have a lot to show you in this presentation, so it will not be possible for me to include much background into the history or scientific validity of remote viewing. Let me just say that it is a real phenomenon, and while many people laughed at those who studied it in decades past, very few are laughing any longer, whether they be in academia, government, or the mainstream media. We are currently in a so-called waiting to exhale moment in terms of the widespread recognition of remote viewing as a real phenomenon. But we don't need to wait until everyone on the planet exhales before continuing with our own work using remote viewing to investigate truly curious or anomalous events and phenomena. But for those of you who do want more background on the subject of remote viewing as it is done using military or military-derived methodologies, I suggest that you visit the website for the Farsight Institute, where you can find a huge quantity of high-quality and squeaky clean scientific studies using remote viewing. There you will find peer-reviewed published research, a wide range of fascinating topics and projects, as well as a great many examples that you can peruse. To very briefly summarize a basic description of remote viewing, I can say that it is a mental process that allows highly trained individuals to accurately perceive what is called targets, which are places, events, and people across time and space. People who use these procedures are called remote viewers, and when they are really good, they can describe such things in great detail without being told anything in advance about what they are assigned to perceive, a condition known as working blind. There are only a few highly trained remote viewers in the world today, and I have long argued that this needs to be addressed seriously in the near future. But a few highly skilled remote viewers do exist now, and they are capable of supplying perceptual data that are what some call scary good. In early 2014, I enlisted the help of two gifted remote viewers who are among the best on the planet currently, Dick Allgaier and Daz Smith, to work on this new project. Of course, to keep them blind, they were not told anything about the new project, only that a new project existed together with a request that they remote view for it. Nothing else. They are both second-generation civilian remote viewers who use military-derived methodologies. Both Daz Smith and Dick Allgaier have participated as remote viewers in many years of public research conducted at the Farsight Institute. This project, involving the 9/11 attacks, is essentially a video remote viewing project. That is, the core data for this project were recorded using video, not paper and pen. Also, all remote viewing sessions for this project were also conducted solo. The viewers were totally blind to the targets, and there were no camera people, remote viewing monitors, or anyone else present while the sessions were being done who could have influenced the viewers when they were doing their work. Before diving into the results of this project, let me make an important point about the general nature of remote viewing data. Remote viewing data can never prove something, especially when considered in isolation from physical corroboration. You cannot say that something is true simply because someone remote viewed it. Remote viewing data are perceptions made by talented and highly trained individuals who have studied and practiced these military or military-derived remote viewing methodologies for a great many years. But perceptions, any perceptions, whether done by the 5 physical senses of hearing, touch, sight, taste, and smell, or using remote viewing, cannot prove anything all by themselves. Remote viewing perceptions are essentially eyewitness reports. The better the eyewitness, the more likely that the eyewitness reports will turn out to be accurate. Remote viewing data, when done well, really can be very persuasive, especially since the data can be independently corroborated across multiple remote viewers, and the data can be compared with physical data. The viewers can also dive deeply into the events in a manner that would not be possible for physical eyewitnesses. Now, let's introduce exactly how we are going to address these mysteries by spending a minute talking about the targets that the remote viewers were assigned to perceive. A target is a place or event that constitutes the focus of attention for the remote viewers. And again, let me repeat that the remote viewers do their work blind, and they are not told anything about the target when they remote view. Neither Dick Allgaier nor Daz Smith were told anything about any of the targets for this study until all of their remote viewing sessions were completed for the entire project. When you see the quality of these data, you may wish to remind yourself of this from time to time. As we go through all of the data, note that the data obtained by Daz Smith and Dick Allgaier are very correspondent. All of the major elements match for both viewers, and none of the data from either viewer directly contradicts the data from the other. Beyond the obvious overlap between the data for the two viewers, each individually add new elements as well, so that a more complete picture of what happened long ago is obtained by combining the data from both viewers. It is also useful to mention that neither Daz nor Dick communicated in any way at all during the remote viewing phase of the project, and they lived on opposite sides of the planet, Daz Smith in the UK and Dick Allgaier in Hawaii. Now let's discuss the actual targets used in this study. Again, the viewers were shown these targets only after all of their sessions were totally finished and submitted for the entire project. The exact wording of the targets, including photographs, can be found on the website for the Farsight Institute. Now, the first target for this study focuses on Building 7 of the World Trade Center in New York City. We want to know why it collapsed. The second and third targets involve the south and north towers of the Twin Towers World Trade Center. Again, the controversy centers around why those towers collapsed, pancake fashion, after the aircraft impacts. Starting with the fourth target for this project, the focus shifts to the Pentagon attack that occurred on the same day as the World Trade Center attacks. For this target, we focus on the initial takeoff or launch of whatever did crash into the Pentagon. If it was an airliner, then we should see the takeoff of an airliner from an airport. If it was a missile, as many of the skeptics claim, then we should see the launch of a missile. The fifth target again centers on the Pentagon attack, but this time the focus is on what actually caused the damage to the building. The sixth target for the project tries to approach the issue of whether the impact on the Pentagon was from an airliner or something else by trying to find the American Airlines aircraft that was flown as Flight 77, but this time on the day after the attack. A seventh and final target returns our attention to New York and specifically focuses on any preparations that may have been done to cause the vertical pancaking collapse of the North Tower of the World Trade Center. If the preparations were simply terrorists taking flight lessons, then that is what we would get. But if something else was going on, well, we need to see what it is. And now, the results. Here is what we found. I have organized this presentation of the results for this study thematically. That is, rather than simply going through the sessions target by target from the first to the last, it is more useful for me to present the data such that some of the major issues raised by those who question the governmental account of the 9/11 attacks are addressed directly. Let's start with the question of whether or not Building 7 of the World Trade Center collapsed as a result of an office furniture and diesel fuel fire, or if it was brought down by a controlled demolition. Here is a session by Dick Allgaier that basically covers the entire process of that structure's destruction. Listen and watch carefully, and remind yourself, when you are watching this, that Dick had absolutely no prior information regarding this target or any other target when he did this session. At the end of the session, note that Dick describes molten metal in the debris of the structure.
It's a process that's boom. it's broad. Okay, so the words severe compression. Severe compression, collapse, crashing collapse, a crashing cascading collapse, like demolition, crashing demolition, downward torque, downward torquing forces, torque, blowing outward. Just, it's like this is pancaking here, but almost complete destruction and vaporization, everything turning to dust here, but this tremendous compression of severe collapse with a downward torque. And this is, when I see this, it's very wide. It's right in front of me. It fills my peripheral vision, but it's also tall, and it's but above it's a billowing cloud. But I'm more drawn to the wideness of it I'm right up on it, and it's extremely violent. Imagine this motion of concussive, compressive collapse that comes downward like this, and it seems to be structural, but it's no longer a structure. It's now become energy. And there's a word that a phrase that comes to mind. I saw this when I was doing this on paper, that was bright blue-white flash of light energy. I'll draw it blue, light blue, but it's white hot. Very focused. And the idea, as I see this, the phrase that is in my mind is metal turns to vapor. Metal turns to vapor. So, like steel, tungsten, iron, titanium, heavy steel that just becomes, in an instant, is vaporized. What would cause that? It's a concussive force that's not, the word is not conventional. It's not like like a regular explosive. If you blew something up, the concussion wave travels at, 2,000 feet a second, limited in, I don't understand this, but it's the speed of sound for the given medium, the metal, the material, it can only go so fast. But with this one, it's like milliseconds, like in a flash. It's like fission, nuclear, the word, neutron. I can't spell. Neutron, strontium, barium, tritium, like fissionable. This is nuclear, but you know, when you think nuclear, metal turns to vapor. Okay. So traditionally, we've seen Hiroshima. You've seen the movie. You've seen atomic blasts in the South Pacific or the Nevada test site. So if you're thinking of a nuclear explosion, it's like, here's the horizon, and the thing goes off here, and then this is miles wide, and it mushrooms up. It makes a mushroom cloud that's, what are they, 30,000 feet high? I mean, this is like, people are this big, so this thing is huge. But I'm getting a sense of not this, although it's kind of shaped like this. Not that. It's contained. It's small. It's contained in a structure. This looks like my it's a cylinder. And it's only like the size of my new computer, a vacuum cleaner. It's only like this big, 30 inches. And it's cylindrical, metallic, and there's wiring and gizmos and gadgets and things. But the idea of really small mini nuke, wired up to set off 3 or 4. Like, this is, the big explosion is measured in megatons, kilotons. This is like 1/100th of a kiloton, like tiny. How can they make I don't know. Can they make a little nuclear weapon that you would use that wouldn't blow up a city, but would blow up a big structure? Because I see that's structural core. beams, metal, heavy, and then cross beam, support, and then, so if, okay, like say that's the central one, and then I got a sense of these being wiring and like a shaped charge that focuses it on the core inward, that detonate at a within milliseconds, and then this just causes the severe compression collapse. These are carefully wired with like fiber optics. It's fiber optic wiring, so it's fast enough that it wow. What else do I see? When this cloud came down, the fine particulate choking the vaporized metal, vaporized concrete, vaporized everything. And this is molten hot. I mean, melted metal hot, searing. Somewhat radioactive. I could make a Geiger counter go off.
Now let us move over to the North Tower of the World Trade Center and watch a session by Daz Smith. Here, Daz perceives the actual impact of the aircraft and the resultant explosion, but then he shifts to perceiving the ultimate destruction of the structure, and he reports metallic particles that are made of molten metal in the debris, paralleling the observation of molten metal in the debris made by Dick Algar. This idea of molten metal repeats regularly in these data, and it is probably an important clue as to what actually happened. And again, the issue is often raised by architects and engineers who question the official story of the cause of the collapse.
It feels, for all intents and purposes, like an explosion, so I'll try to describe what I'm feeling. I'm feeling clouds. But these feel like they move outwards from a core. It feels like it hit like this. And I feel clouds and energy. There's quite a lot of energy here, and it's dense and packed and messy, loud, vibrational, warm, bright. I also feel like I can if I'm in the cloud, and I'll move into the cloud now, I can feel things rushing past me at speed, and it feels like being hit by small parts of debris, very small particles. I can see and feel in slow motion very small particles moving outwards in all distances and all angles, but moving out from a central core. So this does feel like some kind of damaging or explosive kind of action here. This abruptness, this abrupt stop. It does feel like some kind of energy moving inwards, stop, loud, explosive action outwards. But yeah, as I said, I can feel, if I stand in amongst it here now, I can actually feel the billowing kind of clouds and energy and movement around me, and also feel the vibrational energy in the tiny particles moving out, the debris, the mess, the noise. And this also causes a lot of, there's some loudness with this and noise. This also causes confusion, and there's some fear as well. I can actually feel fear in people it feels like there are people watching this event and they're very fearful of it. Yeah, great rolling clouds of energy, and I can feel them moving outwards from the core of this. Blowing, lots of, it feels like dust, energy, clouds, mess. Just feels really messy and chaotic. Okay, so that's one part of 10C that I get really strongly. And these particles as well. Well, let's get rid of this first. So we have 10C, and it's really kind of like intense. And there's this intense energy, movement, billowing, and it feels cloudy and messy. And I can feel like it moves outwards from the core. So I feel it dissipating and rolling outwards. Loud energy release. But within this, there are these, I feel there are these particles. I can feel them moving at speed, propelled forward, outwards from the core, and I feel them rushing past me. It's almost like being sandblasted. If you're standing in front of this target here, you can feel the rush of wind and heat and energy and light, and you can feel abrasiveness. It feels like you're being dusted and sprayed with particles of dust or sand or something as they spread outwards. Some are bigger and smaller than others. So it's not just particles. There are large pieces of what I call debris as well, but a lot of them are very small particles. And these small particles are, if they're moving close, no, that's not right. They're irregular shaped. And I want to say molten, because they feel jagged in parts, but they also have rounded parts to them as well. And they're like moving fast. Silvery and grey, but some of them are like orange and yellow as well, because they feel hot. They feel the heat is propelling them. They feel like they're on fire. So they feel like, and it feels like it has a high metal content to these as well. I'm not sure if they're all metal, but I feel like a key to this target are particles. and they are metallic or partly metallic, and it's about the shape of them and the form of them, and they do feel molten or melted in some way, affected by what happens here. So this explosive type of abrupt action event does something to particles, causes particles which feel like they're metal. Yeah, so that's what I get on that part of it. I see. So there is a structure. It feels like there's a structure involved in this. City and urban. It feels like it's infiltrated, for lack of a better word, attacked from the inside, bottom up, which damages, wrecks the structure, and it could even maybe this is the structure that changes shape as well. I can't quite get it. There's an up down motion. I see a structure, and then I see a mess of structure. Has it demolished? Maybe. Okay, let's go back to this. So from the inside it's attacked by men covertly carrying these rounded bricks of chemical substance, dense chemicals. And it feels like these are activated. And then they just go wild. Wild. And I want to put a big around that. Explosive outwards, debris, smoke, clouds, heat, light. Feel it all rolling outwards. Destructive. And there's debris everywhere, and I can feel it. Microscopic debris. Microscopic. That's a good word. That feels right. Microscopic debris and particles, and it's the shape of these that are key. Some feel teardrop shape, elongated, molten. It feels different on one. I can't get it. The particles feel strange, different. Molten on one side. Something by the way they moved. They're dispersed. I don't know. Anyway, the particles are like evidence. They're like a fingerprint to this case, or this target. What am I calling it? A case. Dense particles. It feels like metal. It feels like little teardrop and balls of moving metal. It's just like moving out from the target, being dispersed. Like if I stood in amongst it, I can feel it all brushing past me, covering me. White, dusty. Feels like phosphorus. Don't know why I say that. I think it's the white chalky like smoke and dust that I see coming off. Okay, so there's that. More than one group of life are involved in this. As discussed, there's a top tier of influential, business-like, secret, powerful people that send orders down to what feels like 3 other groups at least. One group does this: they infiltrate the structure from the inside, damaging or destroying it. Another group do something on the outside, and it almost feels like they're spotting or something. You know, they're mobile as well. They have a van. It feels like they have a gun or a weapon of some kind that fires and shoots or something. And then there's another group that seem like they're in control of a fast-moving object that hits something or explodes. Suddenly explodes. Feels like it almost comes up against a wall. It's like flying through the air, and then all of a sudden it's an abrupt explosion, you know, and then it's gone. That's it, I think, in summary. Yeah, a lot happening. It's almost too much to concentrate on. I keep getting pulled in different directions, keep seeing different things. A big structure changing shape. It's almost like if a structure were a transformer, it would start off as one thing. It would start off as a structure, and then it would transform, and then it would be a big transformed shape, complete different shape. Again, explosions. I see a huge explosion. I keep seeing these particles, microscopic and small particles, debris everywhere, surrounding me. People running in fear, confusion, very emotional. It feels like there's death involved at this target. People die, there's distress. I can see people moving away from clouds, rolling clouds of debris and ash and smoke, and it feels like some kind of catastrophic event, you know. Another AOL there of Pompeii, because of I saw people running away from the clouds of dust and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so there's energy, there's mass, there's movement, it's out from a core. So I'll try to do this. So there's this, this feels like it radiates outwards, so it does feel explosive. There is energy. There's lots of heat. And white, yellow, orange, and with this radiating kind of like waves, there's a smoke. I can see clouds and smoke. So there's lots of clouds. It's smoky. And with this is particles of debris, and it seems to be shooting everywhere. Large and small, microscopic, small particles of fast-moving debris, little particles. And if I have to look close at these particles, they feel like different shaped circles, but moving. But not all circles. Some of them feel elongated, teardrop shaped. Not all of them though. And they feel silver, grey, shiny, and white. They feel white powder. coats them. Hot. They feel like metal. It feels like molten metal and chemicals. It feels like a mix. Feels like a mix. And we've got the AOL here of manganese. So hot, yeah. So there's a kind of like an explosion outwards from a central core. Lots of I can feel waves moving outwards. Yeah, I can feel waves of energy and motion. In amongst this, there's lots of heat and light, smoke, acrid, thick chemicals. Lots of noise as well, fizzing noise, outwards, blowing noise. And with this motion, I can feel it's like being coated with sand, being sandblasted, particles and debris and bits and pieces going out from every angle. And it's this I feel this important, this key. It's like a fingerprint. It all feels very weird. It feels like evidence. Yeah, this feels key to the target, really. Maybe even tell you who was involved or something. Particles. Yeah, it just feels like a big explosion of heat, energy, mass, chemicals, spraying particles everywhere. And just another AOL of Hadron Collider because of the particles and the energy and all that kind of stuff. So I need to put that to one side. Yeah, that's what can I say on the particles? What else is it? Feel metallic, silver, grey. Feel like there's loads of them, small and large. Microscopic though, microscopic feel to be important. Particles. All from central explosion. Another AOO here of a big bang, or a big bang anyway. Anything else? Have I missed anything?
Remember that firefighters and police at Ground Zero, on the day of the attacks and afterwards, reported significant quantities of molten metal running in streams in the debris, like a foundry. You can see some of these reports of molten metal in videos on YouTube. Jet fuel produces a low temperature burn, and it cannot melt metal. But apparently, certain explosions used in demolitions could do that, since in some situations it is useful to melt the steel infrastructure in order to demolish a building. I am not an explosives expert by any means, but others who know more about this subject have written about it and spoken about it widely with respect to the 9/11 events. What I can say is that the remote viewing data do support the idea that there was molten steel at the target site. Now, let us shift to the South Tower of the World Trade Center. Remember that the target specifically states that the viewer should focus on the cause of the collapse of the structure. In this session by Daz Smith, he focuses on something that would indeed cause the South Tower to collapse. You best see and hear it for yourself.
Okay, so there's life. And I think these are men, they're male. Generally, yes, okay. more than one group. Okay, so it feels like this. Feels like a group here. Okay, so it feels like 4 groups. This feels like a top tier of men, and these act like commanders, generals. These are in charge. These give the orders, and they give the orders down to what feels like 3 separate groups. A group over here, again males, 4 to 8 of them, close knit, work in a group, trained. They have something to do with a thrusting motion in an object. There's a second group here, again 4 to 8 males, trained. These are outside somewhere, and they feel in a different location. They feel mobile, and it feels like they have one vehicle, which feels like it's some kind of transport or transit vehicle, and they feel like they're attacking something. They feel like an attacking force, and they feel like they have a structured object that they're attacking with. It feels like some kind of weapon, and I keep seeing something like a shoulder-mounted weapon. These feel like some kind of soldiers in disguise, some kind of, it feels covert. I also have a 4th group here, again males, organised, work well as a group, they feel trained. They're focused, following orders. Feels like it is a group of 4 to 8 again, and they feel like they're all male. Feel aggressive. I can see the actions of them. They're very wary about what they're doing. Very secretive, more secretive than the other groups. This group here feels like it moves. It is mobile, using vehicles. They feel like they're vans, and they feel white or grey, and they don't feel like no markings, which might be important. They feel like they drive to a target, go inside. So I feel like they're inside a structure, and they start off low down in a structure as well. So we have a structure which has many levels, and it's in an urban area surrounded by other structures. And there's these men, and they start off down low. They're inside a structure, and they transport something. I can see them moving something, and this feels blocky. But not with straight edges. Weird. Oh, how to draw this? lot. Yeah. Lots of like solid. It feels solid but malleable, like Play-Doh. Not like Play-Doh. Anyway, they seem to be moving this and placing it. Key areas. This feels low. Okay, so yeah, we have more than one group of people, and there are others involved as well. Whoa, there's others involved as well. There are people in and around this target structure, and these people at some point panic. They have lots of fear, they run, terror, and some death. There's some death involved with this target somewhere. This feels like a military action of some kind. It feels covert in places, but not everywhere. This feels covert. This feels semi-covert. This feels public. These feel very secretive and covert and hidden up here. There are quite a few stopgaps between these guys and these guys. There almost seems to be a third tier here of communication or something that disconnects them. I don't know what. So that's the life involved. Let's see if we can get a bit more about what these guys are doing with this structure. So bear with me a second. Okay, so let's see if we can pick up a bit more on what this infiltrating group of males are doing at this target. Okay, so there's definitely objects and males. So there's definitely life. Definitely a structure. There's definitely objects. And the males, they're moving, they're mobile. They have transport, and this feels like a vehicle with wheels. It feels like a van. It feels white, grey, and I want to say boring, normal. And they drive in and under a structure, and this feels covert and quiet. It feels like some kind of event where the structure is empty. It feels empty. And these people kind of like, almost like come in through the back door kind of thing and secretly enter a structure. Okay, what do they do? What do they do? What do they do? Okay. We have a structure. And it feels like it's in a city. There are other structures around. These men feel like they drive in and under it somehow, so It feels like they're mainly in the lower region here, but they move upwards through the structure, and as they move up, I see them focus on areas. It feels like something you see in a Hollywood film or something, to be honest. It feels like I see not drawing it very well. It feels like there's some kind of vertical beams or something, and they place. It feels like feels like some kind of Hollywood film, and it feels like you have a group of men placing what only feels like you see in these films. You see plastic explosive type charges being placed on walls and stuff. That's what it feels like. It feels like there are men placing big kind of like malleable lumps or bricks of things on within the structure here. They start off at the bottom and they move up. They know where they're going. They're following some kind of map or diagram. They're very practiced. They've done this hundreds of times, but not in the structure. They've practiced this. They know what they're doing. They work well as a team. They're very fast, very efficient. There's no wastage of time in movement with these guys. They feel like some kind of. They feel like it feels like I'm viewing a special forces unit involved in some kind of infiltration exercise or something. It's just the way the way I can feel these guys and see these guys moving, how they communicate. It's not like a loose band of people, and it's almost like seeing a hardened bunch of criminals or something trying to get into a safe vault or something. The environment feels like a bank safe. It feels clean. I see lots of whites. I see lots of modern shiny materials, stainless steel, that kind of stuff. Lots of metal, marble, all that kind of stuff. So it feels corporate, like a bank or something like that. It feels like that kind of structure. These guys are in there, and they're doing something covertly, and it feels like they're placing some kind of explosive chemical. It feels like they're there to damage the structure. Okay, let's see if we can get a bit more into what this stuff is. I want to know a bit more about this stuff. Okay, so let's see if we can see what they're doing. Okay, so there's definitely some verticals, solid and dense, supporting, and it does feel like it feels like there are these bricks and they're densely packed against the structure. What happens? Okay. And it does feel like an explosion. Heat, huge heat, particles, bits. I can see bits, tiny little bits. So there's a heat, light, feels explosive. There's a reaction. It dissipates outwards, very smoky. And there's a smell, it's really dense smell. And it feels like, I'm just trying to think, it feels like when I'm at the gun range, but not. It's thicker and it's a bit more acrid. Yeah, burning. And if I had the AOL at this point, I'd say it looks like a welder's torch. Yeah, so it does feel like an explosion of sorts. Lots of debris. I can feel the particles. You know, if I stand in amongst it here, I can feel the light and the heat all around me. It's radiating. It is really bursting outwards with heat and energy. Waves of heat and energy. Very light, very bright. And this particle and debris, I can see it bursting. Is it bursting the right word? Bursting out, loads and loads of little sparkles, particles, debris. And it's these feel important. And it's the way they look. Oh, like teardrops. Is it like teardrops? Circle balls. They feel like they're moving and molten, hot particles. And the makeup. There's something about the makeup of these particles that's key to this target. Is almost like a fingerprint. Yeah, fingerprint. That's a good one. It feels like evidence. This feels like some kind of covert terrorist type event, using a chemical inside a structure that damages the structure. It feels covertly done by a group of highly trained men acting on orders. They secretly infiltrate this structure using a van. They seem to be dressed in overalls, almost like decorators type things. You know, it feels like one-piece suits. They feel quite young and quite fit, athletic men. 30s to 40s, most of them, tanned. The one I see has dark skin, dark hair. Sorry, cut quite short, no facial hair. They work well as a group, very economic in the way they move. Each one knows what they're doing. They start off on the bottom of the structure. They work their way up. They place these solid brick type things at key places within the structure, all the way up to the top, and then they leave. Same way you came, in a van, out, and it feels nondescript. It just feels like a normal white or grey van that you see, and their coveralls just feel like just grey coveralls. I don't see or feel any logos or anything on it. Just a quick in and out type thing, and it does feel like some kind of weird espionage type secret covert operation. Using this bricks, these explosive bricks. which spray out as this happens. It damages the structure, and I think if anyone were to investigate this, it would be this what you'd be looking for. The particles. The particles seem to be key on this. All throughout the paper sessions, I just had this thing about these sprays of particles being coated in these sprays of particles and clouds of dust and debris, heat, an explosion. It feels molten metal.
Dick Allgaier gives us an alternate view of the cause of the collapse of the Twin Towers. In this next session, he describes activity that is going on elsewhere. I admit that this next session gave me the goosebumps when I watched it for the first time.
Call this Land 1. Seems rural, not a lot of buildings, but some buildings. Mostly flat, maybe some slightly rolling hills here, but mostly horizon. And like a road that goes like this. But a small road, a two-lane highway kind of road out in the country. Some foliage, some trees, and then some other trees here. And I see a long fence. This is like this is a pretty this is a pretty serious fence. This is like a keep out. It may be electrified. Certainly there's some sensors here. So this is a serious fence. This is not your old wooden fence that the cattle, you'd keep the sheep in the pasture. No, this is more of a fence that you'd have at an installation to keep people out. It's pretty tall. It's a substantial. This is a stay away, authorized, unauthorized type of that. Unauthorized signs, warning signs kind of fence. Not far from the road. And looking at the land, it's I smell in texture of matted vegetation like old dry grass. It's short but not manicured. It's just kind of like a field that's not well cared for. And I see some mounds that look like I want to say bunkers. There's a base here in Hawaii, past Pearl Harbor. between Hickam and Iroquois Point, there's these mounds or bunkers that are mostly like dirt. Is the word revment, or there's something stored inside here. And I see another feature in this area that's brown. Okay, it's here. Like this. I want to say wire mesh. It looks like chain link, but it's not a fence. It's a round fence with posts every so often. And there's posts outside. But this part's all connected with wiring, like a chain link thing, like on a corral. And there's something round in the middle. It's like one of those antennas. It's like a array. Man, I don't know what that's called. A circle of antennas that make an antenna inside the perimeter. And a structure's over here. Not big, 1 or 2 story. And it, I don't know if that's where the guys were. Well, I'd have to say this is like a military base, NSA facility, Virginia, Maryland comes to mind. Virginia or Maryland, somewhere outside of Washington kind of area. Looks drier than that. I mean, it doesn't look as green. Maybe it's a dry time of year, but I get matted vegetation. So they're in a structure. Kind of an entrance here. And these are screens or monitors, or there seems to be guys standing here like they could be guards, or they're just standing there by the entrance. Other people here. Now there's an open area. Like a big table. Is that where these guys are standing here? And these are the guys that are, they were the pointing guys. So these people's attention is really focused right here, but there's other people. There's a lot going on here. There's some people just observing here. Okay. So they're off to the side. They're watching like you'd watch the action at a poker game, but it's not a poker game, or the blackjack or the roulette or the crap table. Like, they're very interested, but not exactly taking part, but they seem to have a stake in it. And I didn't mean to get off on the gambling thing, but there's papers, and there's little objects, maps, objects that are like, you'd place something there to symbolize, like on an aircraft carrier, they have a table to know where all the aircraft are coming and going or are on the deck. And this isn't an aircraft carrier, but they have little Monopoly game pieces, not game pieces, but items they move around on this table as they look at printouts, and people bring over information and put new papers down, and they look at the paper, and they're monitoring something. Okay, they're monitoring a event in real time, but it's fluid. So they've got plan A, plan B. They've got all kind of contingencies. If this happens, oh man, there's like a flow chart that is like, if this happens, then we go to here, and if this happens, then this and this happens, and there's this really complex, like a flow chart. So A happens or doesn't happen. So then they look for B, and then as B happens, a whole other set of plans comes in to effect, and that sets off something else, and then and there's those radio sounds again, the squelches, the hiss, the squawk, and but wow. So what are they doing? This guy got his third star for taking part in this and doing a good job. He got rewarded in what's the word when you go up and promoted. So yeah, there's papers here that have summaries of events. There's maps. There's looking at locations and waypoints, and they're collating all this information in real time, and it's like deadly serious, but not oh, you're not going to see any news cameras in there. This is real sworn to secrecy kind of guys. They're only people take part of this are way trusted. Way trusted. So, it has a military feel, but they're not all military. They're civilians, high-level guys. It reminds me of Eisenhower, Ike monitoring D-Day, like he was in a room where the reports come in, like we got the beachhead, or this is happening, or move this army group here, or these units. They're reacting and giving orders, but I have a feeling that it's a plan that is long in the making, that was set into effect, and then they watch it happen, and as A becomes B, then that doesn't happen, then they go this way, and it's all so well planned out that it can go a number of directions and still get where they need to go. This is protected in any number of ways, electromagnetically, and Glenn Wheaton would know way more than me about this, but what, EMF, RF shielding, like enclosed in a, that's the biggest damn Faraday cage, it's really fine. It's also camouflaged optically, like high-tech, well, okay, first let me say, how do you spell that? Camo. So there's camouflage, there's high-tech, almost the cloaking comes to optical cloaking, and then shielding from, like, trying to stop you from remote viewing it. Yeah, I can't get in this. I mean, let me. All I'm going to get from this is there's any number of kinds of shielding.
Notice that with all of the data you have seen so far, we don't have much about Islamic radicals who are minimally trained pilots and thugs. I personally have no doubt that the Al-Qaeda terrorists were on most or all of the aircraft that flew into the World Trade Center, in the sense that I am assuming that part of the official story is true, even though, I admit, there are many debates involving physical evidence that seem to contradict much of the official story even on this point. But, giving the official story the benefit of the doubt, at least with respect to whether or not the terrorists were indeed on the aircraft, it is still odd that they do not appear as major players in the remote viewing data. These remote viewers don't seem to perceive those terrorists as being central to the 9/11 story. It is as if those terrorists did not really matter with respect to what actually happened. In retrospect, I can sort of see that if there was a secret plan to create a scripted Pearl Harbor type of event that would enable the United States to enter into a major war involving two countries in the Middle East, especially Iraq, since that is where the oil is located, then it would seem foolhardy to have the entire plan depend on the piloting capabilities of terrorists who had exceptionally minimal flight training, especially considering the advanced flying skills that would be required to pull off this job. Additionally, the plan would have depended on all of the airline pilots willingly giving up their piloting seats to the terrorists. A good number of pilots have questioned if this really would be likely, especially for so many aircraft at once. I am a pilot, and I would have fought to the death before giving up my aircraft to a terrorist who almost certainly would have killed everyone anyway. Well, it so happens that Dick Allgaier did have one session that does seem to relate to the question of exactly who flew those planes. This session focuses on the events involving the destruction of the North Tower of the World Trade Center.
This guy had graying hair, and one of these things. I think may have been sunglasses. He's turning his head this way and he's looking. Okay. Now he's got those these things on his shoulder. I'll get to the point. He looked like a pilot. Like I said, short graying hair. And he's sitting there like this, and there's a window here, and the big window here, and you know, airplane things, gauges and controls, and there's stuff up here, dials, and all that shit. And here's the, and he can't control his airplane, and he doesn't know where he is. He's looking down, you know, like he's having a really bad moment of like panic and disorientation. He's disoriented, and this has never happened to him before. So I saw that, then I saw it again, and I could recognize this guy. He had gray hair and big eyebrows, and so then I see switches and gizmos and stuff. And there's another one here. And you know, they got the yoke there. And this guy's here. And yeah, switches, knobs, dials, there's all kind of gauges and stuff. It's like an airplane. Okay. This is what I saw, you know, and I honestly, I think that was my first visual ideogram, but this was before I got to formal work. And my sense is that the controls don't work. They have, you know, the controls are inoperative. It's like electronic hijack. The autopilot is piloting on its own, and they can't shut it off, and they can't override it, and they can't. They're flipping switches. The thing is, they're not strong enough to. The yoke is just doing its own thing, and this thing is just going off.
Remember, you cannot say something is proven true simply because someone remote views it, even if the viewer is the best viewer on the planet. But remote viewing data can be very persuasive, especially when compared with other physical evidence. Given how accurately those aircraft were flown into the Twin Towers, and given all of the other data obtained for this project, I must admit that for me personally, it does seem possible that the aircraft might have been controlled remotely, even if the terrorists were on the planes, and that the pilots or whoever were flying those planes may not have been able to do anything about it. The control would obviously need to extend to the radio system, otherwise the pilots would have reported everything to the control towers. This concludes part 1 of a 2-part presentation of remote viewing data relating to the terror attacks that occurred on September 11, 2001. The focus in this first part has been on the attacks on the World Trade Center buildings in New York. In part 2, the focus shifts to both the attack that occurred on the Pentagon on that same day, as well as the personnel and overall command and control structure of those who organized the dual attacks in New York and Washington, D.C. If you feel that this first part of the documentary was useful and educational, I hope you get a chance to watch the second part as well. Again, this is a fascinating experiment in using remote viewing to peer into one of the greatest mysteries of our day. You can only make up your own mind if you allow yourself to see the data and entertain all ideas and possibilities. Remember that it was not too long ago that just about everyone on this planet thought that it was outrageous to think that the Earth was not flat. Don't be a flatlander. See you in part 2.